It was the latest tragedy to hit the sporting world, especially here in Turkey. On Wednesday, a memorial ceremony was held for the Gaziantepspor midfielder František Rajčović. The Czech international was found dead in his home on Sunday, with authorities telling us on Beyond the Game that the cause was occupational burnout, a type of psychological job-related stress. It's an issue in sport that's still regarded as a taboo. Wales international coach Gary Speed and the former German international goalkeeper Robert Enke also took their lives for a similar reason. And it's not just in football. Last month, the Australian rugby captain Daniel Vickerman committed suicide after a long battle with depression. Now, on Beyond the Game, we've touched on the issue of mental health in sport, and we've spoken to sports psychiatrists. But in order to help us understand the enormity of this issue, I'm joined by two sportsmen whose lives have been well documented in their struggle with depression. I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by the former PFA chairman and the former footballer Clarke Carlisle, who joins me live from Preston. And in London, I'm joined by Leon McKenzie, who's also a former professional footballer who's gone on to be a professional boxer. Now, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Beyond the Game. Clarke, I'll start with you. Now, footballers' lives are, well, they live a very structured life and they live a very disciplined life. But when your career finishes, what do you do and how do you cope?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, Samantha. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be part of these conversations because I think this is an incredibly important topic. But one of the points that I would love to get across in the extent of this conversation is the fact that we will go on to talk about, the minutiae and the little incidents like what you're talking about, like retirement, like filling the void, like the strains and stresses of getting a new contract, of being in the side, of performing. But all these, they're almost besides the point at times. What we need to understand is that depression and the spectrum of mental health illnesses, they're human being conditions, and it's irrespective of what line of work that you have. Everyone is susceptible if the conditions are right. So, there are certain trigger points in football, and just like you mentioned, retirement is one of those.
Well, Leon, I'll bring you in. You were still playing at Charlton when you thought you had a career-ending injury. What was your mindset?
Hi, Sam. Yeah, again, thanks for inviting me on. This is a very passionate topic that I really like to talk about. Similar to what Clarke has touched on already, towards the back end of my career, I think it was more of not being able to sort of prepare for that ending. So going through certain things like injuries, which was a trigger point for me, going through the psychology of, that my career was going to be coming to an end at some point, and just not coping with that very well. So when I was at Charlton, I was at the back end of my career, and I was realising a lot of things while I was going through injuries. Like Clarke said, there's triggers in all of us, and that was one of my triggers to lead me into depression.
Did you feel like you got any support from Charlton or anyone in football at the time?
Well, we're going back to 2009 is when I tried to commit suicide. I would say, which is not really great for me to say, but at that particular time, Charlton, some of the people were, I would say, was aware of the emotions and I'd say serious depression that I was going through, and I'd spoken to a couple of people at the club, but I don't think at that particular time the club in itself knew how to deal with those serious issues, and therefore kind of left me a little bit isolated. Thereafter, I did contact the PFA after the Gary Speed situation, which was a footballer that was a little bit more well-known than me, who had done, a tragedy, taking his own life. And I felt that I had to then contact the PFA to say, well, look, I actually went through this situation, and what can I do to be of help? So I think where things are now, where the PFA is at now within football, I think we're getting better, but definitely so much more work to be done.
Well, Clarke, you were the chairman of the PFA. Can you tell us more about the mentality of a football dressing room? I mean, do people really openly talk about their problems, or do they really bottle them up?
Well, the mentality within the dressing room, as you can imagine, it's very macho. You know, it's alpha male oriented, because these guys, even though they're your teammates, they're actually your first opponents, because there is a squad of 30 to 40 at any football club, and there are only 11 positions in the team on a Saturday. So even though these guys are your teammates and there's an air of solidarity, you still don't want to portray any signs of perceived weakness. And displaying any signs of mental health issues are perceived as such, and that's one of the first things that we've got to change. You know, we've got to educate people and let them understand what mental health issues are. You know, guys have no qualms, footballers especially, have no qualms about talking about and getting treatment for their physical injuries. They're all taken as part and parcel of their job. They will tell the physio, they will take the necessary time out, and they'll come back and try and get their place in the team. Well, there's a vast majority of mental health issues which are just brain injuries. They're injuries to the mind, and all it would need is the requisite amount of time away and rehabilitation, and then these guys can be brought back fitter and stronger than they were before.
Okay, well, Clarke, I do want to stay with you. Now, you had a wife and children, and you're popular. You were known as Britain's most intelligent footballer. But on December the 22nd, you stepped out in front of a lorry on the A64. Now, what led you to that devastating point?
Oh, wow. Well, this issue and what really frustrates me in talking about this issue is everyone wants to deconstruct my journey and wants to look at the minute details that brought me to that point. And in doing so, we miss the point. Mm-hmm. I was suffering from depression, Samantha. Mm-hmm. What was going on in my life, the circumstances, the circumstantial evidence are largely irrelevant. You know, it's the fact that I was suffering from an illness that was it was diagnosed at that point, but I wasn't managing it properly. I wasn't giving it the proper attention that is due. I wasn't taking my medication right. I wasn't getting any professional therapy, and I didn't change any of the social aspects around me that were bringing on my triggers of anxiety and of deepening depression. And that's why my depression got to the point where my perspective was skewed. When I stepped out in front of that truck, I believed that it was the right thing to do. I believed that it was the answer. I wasn't trying to escape from anything. You know, it wasn't like a coward's way. I wasn't running away. I believed that everyone in my life would be better off if I was dead. And that's what happens when you allow complex depression, which is what I'm diagnosed with, if you allow it to run riot without treating it properly and without getting to the root cause of whatever the emotional trauma was that brought it on, if it was that. So now I am doing that. I'm in a healthy place, I'm managing and maintaining a healthy mind, and now I have a healthy perspective. And sat here, I just cannot understand that there is anything that could go on in my world that would bring me to that point. But I'm going to draw a comparison here. It's the same reason why my father, with type 2 diabetes, ended up almost going into a glycemic coma. It's because he was diagnosed with diabetes, but he didn't do anything he didn't take his insulin daily like he was supposed to, and he didn't change his diet or the things that he was eating or his exercise. And so we wonder why his disease got worse and he ended up in this crisis state. That's exactly what happened to me. They said it was the illness within my mind that I didn't look after, and it took me to a crisis state.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Leon, I'm going to bring you back in. You just mentioned your lowest point. Now, I know that family is very important to you. It's a very important support network for you because it was your father that was the one who raced to your hotel room at your darkest moments.
Yes, that's right. Like I say, I was very, very lucky and fortunate to, even be speaking to you today. That's my testimony. Luckily for me, my dad was not too far away when I did make the call. And, like Clarke says once again, when you neglect these issues, they only spiral out of control. And that's exactly what happened to me. It's exactly what's happened to Clarke. Things spiral out of control and, our minds become very ill. And that is the reality with depression, anxiety, bipolar. If it's not treated properly, you will crash. And at that particular time, I was very fortunate to have a good, family unit around me. And luckily, my dad was there to obviously come to my beck and call.
Well, you are from a boxing dynasty. Your father was a British and European champion, and your uncle was a 3-time world champion in boxing. Do you think that having that background helped you recover, especially after your football career?
Yes, I think so. I think boxing came into my life at the right time. I've got fighting in my blood, so I think what I've tried to do is from the relapses I've had, and I'll be honest with you, even since 2009 at my lowest point, I've still had darker moments with years to come on. The difference is that I respect the illness. I know how to treat it a little bit more better than I did, and for anyone out there that is suffering, my biggest advice is to speak to your loved ones, speak to anyone close. That's why it's important, whether it's me that's speaking or Clarke or whoever it is, just society within itself, to be able to speak. If you're struggling, it's obviously a little bit difficult in the sports world, as we are, realising more and more. But in that change room scenario, it's not always the easiest point to, kind of bare your soul. Because you're worrying about so many things, being picked for the team, how you'll be judged. Because let's be honest, we live in a very judgmental world, and some of us maybe be a little bit isolated within coming forward, but I do urge you to definitely speak to loved ones, and I think it's a very not only is it therapeutic, but it definitely helps your journey going forward.
Okay, well, a question to both of you. Leon, I'll stick with you. Outside of Mental Health Day, is enough being done to recognise and support this illness in sports, or does it take, another high-profile name to suffer in order to get people to take the situation seriously?
Yeah, well, I think you've hit the nail on the head right there, because it shouldn't have to take another high-profile celebrity to have such a tragedy in their life, and everyone else's life that are left behind. I think we've got to get to the stage now where we are focusing a little bit more on mental health than we have done, addressing the serious issues before lives are taken, putting money into the right areas to enhance the progression of mental health, and just being able to, like myself, being able to continue talking, hearing more people speak about mental illness. I think it's definitely improved because more and more people are speaking, and I think the more and more people that do speak is only progression in itself. But for the authorities that are around it, the money men, as we say, I think there's lots more money that can go into these particular areas, and that will save lives. Okay,
as we draw this interview to a close, I'm going to ask you guys a very simple question. Clarke, how are you?
I'm embarrassingly well today, thank you, Samantha. Life is good. I count my blessings.
Okay, and same to you, Leon. What's happening? When's your next fight? What's going on?
Yeah, obviously I'm working and I'm speaking a lot as well, as you know. Normal sort of job in the week and stuff, and training, ticking over. I'm trying to get back in the ring for that return fight. I believe there's a little bit more fire left in the tank, so I did promise my mum I'd be finishing when I was 40 years old. So I've still got a little bit of time to continue to to win some more fights. But my journey is, I suppose, my journey isn't always smooth, shall we say? So I'm just trying to manage it when it's not smooth, and you know, continue my journey when it is happy times and enjoyed.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us an insight into your lives, your battles, and your recovery. Thank you.